Welcome to the Wisdom Embassy, a place where timeless wisdom meets faith, purpose, and personal transformation. This channel is created for those who desire deeper understanding, stronger faith, and a life guided by wisdom rather than noise. Here at the Wisdom Embassy, every message is designed to inspire your mind, strengthen your spirit, and help you navigate life with clarity, courage, and spiritual insight. Our mission is simple but powerful: to share faith-driven motivation and life-changing principles that help you grow in character, purpose, and inner peace. In a world filled with endless opinions, distractions, and constant noise, the Wisdom Embassy stands as a quiet place of reflection and truth. Here we explore life lessons, faith-based motivation, personal growth, and the kind of wisdom that shapes strong minds and peaceful hearts. These messages are not just words, they are reminders that your life has meaning, your journey has purpose, and your spirit was created to grow stronger through every season you experience. If you are someone who seeks understanding beyond surface-level conversations, if you want guidance that strengthens your heart and brings calm to your mind, then you are in the right place. This channel is for people who want to live with wisdom, walk with faith, and grow into the best version of themselves. Today's message speaks to a season of life that carries deep meaning and powerful lessons. Today's message speaks to a season of life that carries deep meaning and powerful lessons. As people grow older and life begins to slow down, something extraordinary begins to happen. The noise of the world starts losing its control, and wisdom begins to speak more clearly. You begin to realize that true strength is not found in constant arguments, endless explanations, or trying to prove yourself to everyone around you. Real strength appears when a person learns to protect their peace, focus on their inner growth, and walk through life with calm confidence. Focus on their inner growth and walk through life with calm confidence. There comes a moment when silence becomes more powerful than speaking, when reflection becomes more valuable than reacting, and when wisdom becomes the guiding light for every decision. This message will touch your heart because it speaks about a truth many people only understand after years of living. The later seasons of life are not meant to be filled with stress, noise, or unnecessary battles. They are meant to be a time of peace, clarity, and deeper connection with faith and purpose. So wherever you are watching from, take a moment to relax your mind and open your heart. Allow this message to speak to you, and allow this message to speak to you and remind you that every stage of life carries wisdom waiting to be discovered. And as you listen today, remember that sometimes the most powerful growth happens in the quiet moments when the soul chooses peace, reflection, and trust in the path God has prepared ahead. There comes a season in every human life when the noise of the world slowly begins to lose its importance. The things that once demanded your attention no longer carry the same weight. The arguments that once seemed necessary begin to feel unnecessary. The race to prove something to others starts to fade away, and in that quiet transition, something powerful begins to happen within your spirit. You start to understand that the greatest strength a person can have in the later seasons of life is not the ability to speak loudly, but the wisdom to remain silent and focused on what truly matters. The book of Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for everything under heaven, a time to speak and a time to keep silent. Many people learn how to speak when they are young, but very few learn the deep discipline of silence as they grow older. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not fear. Silence is wisdom that has matured through experience. When a person reaches the later chapters of life, God has already allowed them to walk through many seasons. You have seen success and failure. You have known joy and disappointment. You have experienced moments when people celebrated you and moments when they misunderstood you. Through all these experiences, life begins to teach you something that cannot be learned from books alone. It teaches you that peace is more valuable than proving a point. In younger years, people often feel the need to respond to every criticism. They want to explain themselves to everyone. They want to defend their reputation at every opportunity. But maturity brings a different perspective. With time, you realize that not every comment deserves a response. Not every situation requires your voice. Sometimes the greatest victory is the decision to remain quiet and protect the peace God has placed inside your heart, and protect the peace God has placed inside your heart. Inside your heart, the scripture in Proverbs tells us that even a fool is considered wise when he keeps silent. This verse carries a profound lesson. Silence has the power to preserve dignity and protect wisdom. Words once spoken cannot be taken back. But silence allows a person to observe, to think, and to respond with understanding rather than emotion. As people grow older, one of the greatest gifts they can give themselves is the gift of reflection. Reflection allows you to look back over the journey of your life and recognize the ways God has guided your path. You begin to see how certain disappointments were actually protection. You begin to see how certain delays were actually preparation. The psalmist once wrote that God teaches us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. This means that life is not only about how long we live, but about how wisely we use the time we are given. When a person understands this truth, they begin to guard their energy carefully. They stop wasting time on unnecessary conflict. They stop trying to impress people who do not understand their purpose. They stop allowing the opinions of others to control their peace. Instead, they begin to focus inward. They focus on strengthening their relationship with God. They focus on strengthening their relationship with God. They focus on cultivating gratitude for the blessings that surround them. They focus on developing the quiet strength that comes from spiritual maturity. There is something remarkable about a person who has learned the discipline of silence. Their presence carries a calm authority. They do not need to dominate conversations to be respected. Their wisdom becomes visible through the way they listen, the way they respond, and the way they respond, and the way they remain composed, even when others become emotional. James reminds us that everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. This instruction becomes even more meaningful as people grow older. Life has already provided many lessons. The wise person learns to speak only when their words can bring understanding, encouragement, or guidance. Silence also creates space for God to speak to the heart. To speak to the heart. When life is filled with constant noise, it becomes difficult to hear the gentle voice of wisdom. But when a person learns to be still, they begin to sense the guidance that God provides through quiet reflection. The psalmist declared, "Be still and know that I am God." This is not simply a poetic phrase. It is an invitation to experience peace that goes beyond the chaos of the world. Stillness allows the heart to rest. It allows the mind to become clear. It allows a person to remember that their value does not come from constant activity, but from their relationship with the Creator. As people enter the later stages of life, another important realization, it begins to take shape. They understand that their time and energy are precious resources. In earlier years, people may give their attention freely to many things. They may become involved in arguments, distractions, and endless obligations. But wisdom begins to simplify life. The wise person learns to choose their battles carefully. They understand that not every disagreement needs to be settled. They recognize that protecting their peace is not selfish, but necessary. Proverbs says that a person who has knowledge uses words with restraint. Restraint is one of the greatest signs of maturity. Restraint is one of the greatest signs of maturity. It means having the ability to control the impulse to react immediately. It means choosing thoughtful responses instead of emotional reactions. It means choosing thoughtful responses instead of emotional reactions. In the later seasons of life, restraint becomes a powerful tool for preserving dignity and harmony. Instead of responding quickly to criticism, the wise person pauses. Instead of arguing over misunderstandings, they allow time to reveal the truth. There are moments when silence becomes a form of protection. Words spoken in anger can damage relationships that took years to build. But silence creates space for emotions to settle and for wisdom to guide the next step. Another beautiful aspect of focusing on yourself in later life is the opportunity to rediscover gratitude. When you slow down and reflect on the journey behind you, you begin to notice how many blessings have filled your life. You remember the people who supported you during difficult seasons. You remember the opportunities that allowed you to grow. You remember the moments when God provided help exactly when you needed it. Gratitude transforms the way a person experiences life. Instead of dwelling on regrets, the heart becomes filled with appreciation for the experiences that shaped its character. The Apostle Paul once wrote that he had learned to be content in whatever situation he found himself. Contentment is one of the greatest treasures a person can possess. Contentment is one of the greatest treasures a person can possess. It frees the heart from constant comparison and unnecessary ambition. Contentment allows a person to enjoy the present moment without worrying about what others think or what the world expects. When people reach the later chapters of life, they often begin to realize that true fulfillment does not come from recognition or applause. Does not come from recognition or applause. It comes from knowing that you have lived with integrity, that you have remained faithful to your values, and that you have remained faithful to your values, and that you have treated others with kindness. Micah speaks about what the Lord requires from us: to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. These words capture the essence of a life well lived. They remind us that greatness is not measured by the noise we create, but by the quiet impact we leave behind. Humility grows naturally when a person has experienced the full range of life's seasons. You realize that success is not permanent and that challenges can appear at any moment. This awareness creates compassion for others who are still walking through their own struggles. In old age, humility allows a person to become a source of wisdom rather than judgment. Instead of criticizing the younger generation, the wise person offers guidance through patience and understanding. They remember their own mistakes and use those memories to encourage others rather than condemn them. And in the quiet moments of reflection, when the world becomes still and the heart begins to listen more carefully, a deeper awareness begins to grow inside the spirit. A deeper awareness begins to grow inside the spirit. You begin to realize that life was never meant to be lived at a constant pace of noise and urgency. There was always meant to be a season when the soul slows down, when the mind becomes more thoughtful, and when the heart begins to appreciate the quiet blessings that once went unnoticed. And as that awareness continues to deepen within your heart, you begin to understand that the later seasons of life carry a special kind of beauty. It is not the beauty of youthful strength or the excitement of new beginnings. It is the beauty of wisdom that has been shaped through years of experience. It is the beauty of a spirit that has learned what truly matters and what can quietly be released. When people are young, they often measure life by achievement and recognition. They look for validation from others. They seek applause for their efforts and attention for their ideas. But as time passes and the years unfold, something begins to shift inside the soul. The desire for attention begins to fade, and in its place grows a desire for peace. Peace becomes more valuable than applause. Peace becomes more valuable than proving a point. Peace becomes more valuable than winning an argument. The wisdom literature of Scripture often reminds us of this truth. Proverbs teaches that a person with understanding remains calm even when surrounded by tension. That calmness is not something that appears suddenly. That calmness is not something that appears suddenly. It develops over time as a person learns to control their reactions and guard their heart. Guarding the heart becomes especially important in later years. Life has already exposed you to the full range of human behavior. You have seen kindness and betrayal. You have seen loyalty and disappointment. You have seen moments when people stood beside you and moments when they walked away. Through all these experiences, God teaches the soul something powerful. He teaches that your identity cannot be built on the opinions of others. He teaches that your identity cannot be built on the opinions of others, Your identity must be rooted in the understanding that you are known and valued by your Creator. Psalm 139 speaks beautifully about this truth when it reminds us that God knows our thoughts and understands our path. When a person truly accepts this reality, the need for constant explanation disappears. You no longer feel obligated to defend yourself before every critic. You no longer feel pressured to correct every misunderstanding. Instead, you rest in the quiet confidence that truth has a way of revealing itself over time. Silence becomes your protection. Silence becomes your strength. Silence becomes your strength. Silence becomes the space where wisdom grows. There is also something deeply healing about focusing on yourself in the later stages of life. This does not mean becoming selfish or disconnected from others. It means taking time to nurture your own spiritual, emotional well-being. Many people spend the earlier parts of their lives caring for others. They work to support families. They invest their energy into responsibilities and obligations. They sacrifice personal time to ensure that those they love are protected and provided for. These acts of service are honorable and meaningful. Yet as life progresses, there comes a moment when a person must also learn to care for their own soul. The psalmist once wrote that the Lord restores the soul. Restoration requires stillness. It requires moments when the heart is not rushing from one responsibility to another, but instead resting in quiet reflection. In those moments, you begin to rediscover the simple joys that life offers. You notice the beauty of a sunrise. You appreciate the calm of an early morning. You feel gratitude for the breath in your lungs and the strength in your body. These moments may appear small, but they carry great significance. They remind the heart that life itself is a gift. The Apostle Paul wrote that he had learned the secret of being content, whether in abundance or in need. Contentment is a powerful state of mind. It allows a person to live with peace regardless of external circumstances. In old age, contentment often becomes 1-0. Fee the greatest treasures a person can possess. It means you are no longer chasing approval. It means you are no longer measuring your value by the standards of the world. It means you have discovered that your worth was never dependent on those things in the first place. Contentment allows you to speak less and listen more. Listening is a skill that becomes more valuable with time. Many people spend their lives waiting for the chance to speak, but very few learn the art of truly listening. Listening requires patience. It requires humility. It requires the willingness to place someone else's voice before your own. When a person listens carefully, they begin to understand the deeper struggles and hopes that others carry in their hearts. This understanding creates compassion. Compassion softens the spirit. It prevents bitterness from taking root. It reminds the heart that every person is walking through challenges that may not be visible to the outside world. The letter to the Colossians that may not be visible to the outside world. The letter to the Colossians in kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. These qualities become especially meaningful in the later years of life. They transform the way you interact with others. Instead of reacting quickly with frustration, you respond with patience. Instead of judging harshly, you seek to understand. Instead of holding on to anger, you choose forgiveness. Forgiveness is another gift that becomes increasingly important with age. Life inevitably includes moments of hurt and disappointment. People may say things that wound your heart. They may fail to meet expectations. They may misunderstand your intentions. If these experiences are carried for too long, they can create a heavy burden inside the soul. But forgiveness releases that burden. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring injustice or pretending that pain never existed. It means choosing not to allow that pain to control your future. Ephesians reminds believers to be kind and forgiving, just as God has shown mercy. Mercy allows the heart to remain soft even after experiencing hardship. A soft heart is not a weak heart. It is a strong heart that has learned to trust God with the things it cannot control. As the years continue to pass, another realization begins to emerge within the spirit. You begin to see that life is not measured only by the achievements you collected, but by the impact you made on others. The quiet acts of kindness, the moments of encouragement, the wisdom shared with someone who needed guidance. These are the things that remain long after titles and accomplishments have faded. The book of Galatians encourages believers not to grow weary in doing good, because at the proper time they will reap a harvest if they do not give up. In the later seasons of life, many people begin to see the harvest of the seeds they planted years before. They see the lives that were influenced by their example. B. See the lives that were influenced by their example. They see the relationships that grew stronger because of their patience. They see the ways their faith quietly shaped the lives of others. And in those moments, the heart becomes filled with gratitude. Gratitude brings peace that cannot be purchased or manufactured. It flows from the awareness that God has been present throughout every chapter of your life. Even during the seasons when you felt uncertain. Even during the moments when the path ahead seemed unclear. God was guiding your steps. The prophet Isaiah once wrote that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. This promise reminds us that strength does not disappear with age. Instead, it changes its form. The strength of youth may appear in physica. And remember, the strength of youth may appear in physica, reshaping you. Energy and bold action, but the strength of maturity appears in wisdom, patience, and quiet faith. It appears in the ability to remain calm when others become anxious. It appears in the courage to trust God's plan, even when the future cannot be fully seen. It appears in the discipline to focus on what truly matters and release the distractions that once consumed your attention. And so as the later seasons of life continue to unfold, the wise person begins to walk more slowly but more thoughtfully. Each step carries awareness. Each moment carries gratitude. Each conversation carries intention. The heart becomes quieter, yet the understanding becomes deeper. The voice becomes softer, yet the wisdom becomes stronger. And in that quiet strength, a person begins to discover that the greatest victories in life were never the loud ones that attracted the attention of the crowd. The greatest victories were the silent ones that shaped the soul and brought the heart closer to the peace that only God can give. And as that peace begins to settle deeper into the heart, something remarkable happens within the soul. You begin to realize that life was never meant to be a constant struggle to be heard. Many people spent decades trying to prove their words through words, explanations, arguments, and endless conversations. Arguments and endless conversations. But wisdom slowly teaches a different lesson. Wisdom teaches that a life lived with quiet strength carries more influence than 1,000 loud debates. When a person grows older and begins to focus inwardly, they start to recognize patterns that once went unnoticed. They see how many conflicts in life were unnecessary. They remember moments when they spoke quickly out of emotion rather than understanding. They recall times when silence would have protected their peace and preserved relationships. This realization does not bring regret as much as it brings clarity. Clarity becomes one of the greatest gifts of maturity. It allows a person to see life from a higher perspective. Instead of reacting to every situation, they begin to observe more carefully. Observation becomes a form of wisdom. The book of Proverbs often reminds us that the wise person stores up knowledge. This means that wisdom is not always expressed through constant speech. Sometimes wisdom is gathered quietly through careful attention to the world around us. When you learn to observe rather than react, you begin to see the deeper motivations behind people's actions. You begin to recognize that many arguments are fueled by insecurity rather than truth. You see that many criticisms come from people who are carrying their own unresolved pain. Understanding this does something powerful within the heart. It softens your response to others. Instead of reacting with anger, you respond with patience. Instead of defending yourself at every opportunity, you allow time and character to speak on your behalf. The psalmist wrote that those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be shaken but endures forever. This image carries a profound lesson about stability. A mountain does not need to prove its strength. It simply stands. In the same way, a mature spirit does not need to prove itself to constant conversation, but it stands firm in quiet confidence. Confidence rooted in faith does not require approval from others. Confidence rooted in faith does not require approval from others. It rests on the understanding that God sees the intentions of the heart. This awareness frees a person from the exhausting need to explain themselves to everyone around them. As people grow older, they also begin to understand the importance of protecting their inner environment. The mind and heart are like a garden. Whatever is planted there will eventually grow and influence the way you experience life. If anger and resentment are allowed to take root, they will slowly steal your peace. But if gratitude and faith are cultivated, they will produce joy even in difficult circumstances. Philippians encourages believers to think about whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. This instruction becomes especially valuable in the later seasons of life. 1 Kai, pure Samavrat becomes especially valuable in the later seasons of life. It reminds us that the condition of the mind determines the condition of the spirit. When a person chooses to focus on what is good and meaningful, their heart becomes lighter. They begin to experience a sense of calm that others can feel when they are in their presence. Have you ever noticed how some older individuals carry a peaceful presence wherever they go? They do not speak loudly, yet people feel comforted around them. Their words are few, but when they speak, those words carry weight. That kind of presence is not accidental. It is the result of years spent learning how to guard the heart and discipline the tongue. James once wrote that the tongue is small but powerful, capable of great influence. Because of this, wisdom teaches restraint. Restraint allows a person to use words carefully and purposefully. In younger years, people often feel pressure to respond quickly. Conversations move rapidly, and emotions sometimes take control. But maturity introduces a different rhythm. The wise person becomes comfortable with pauses. They think before speaking. They listen before responding. They allow silence to shape their words. This rhythm of thoughtful communication creates respect. Others begin to recognize that your voice carries wisdom rather than impulsiveness. Another beautiful transformation that often happens in old age is the development of deep gratitude. When you've walked through many seasons of life, you begin to see how temporary most struggles really were. The problems that once seemed overwhelming even shall pass. The storms that once felt endless eventually cleared. And through each season, God remained faithful. Lamentations reminds us that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases and that His mercies are new every morning. When a person reflects on these truths, gratitude begins to fill their heart. Gratitude changes the atmosphere of your life. Gratitude changes the atmosphere of your life. Instead of dwelling on what was lost, you begin to appreciate what remains. You appreciate the gift of another day. You appreciate the relationships that continue to bring meaning to your life. You appreciate the wisdom gained through years of experience. With gratitude comes humility. Humility allows a person to recognize that every stage of life carries its own lessons. The strength of youth teaches courage and ambition, but the calmness of old age teaches perspective. Perspective allows you to see beyond temporary disappointments. It reminds you that life is part of a larger story that God is writing. The prophet Jeremiah spoke about God's plans being plans for peace and a hopeful future. These words are often associated with younger generations, but they carry meaning for every stage of life. They carry meaning for every stage of life. Even in old age, purpose continues to exist. Purpose may no longer appear in the form of large achievements or public recognition. Instead, it appears through quiet influence. It appears when you offer guidance to someone who is struggling. It appears when you share wisdom with someone who is searching for direction. It appears when your calm presence brings reassurance to those who feel overwhelmed. Psalm 92 says that the righteous will still bear fruit in old age and will stay fresh and green. This beautiful image reminds us that a life rooted in faith continues to produce impact long after youthful energy has faded. Fruit in old age often takes the form of wisdom and encouragement. Your experience and encouragement. Your experience says become lessons that can guide others. Your patience becomes a model for those who are still learning how to navigate life. So as still learning how to navigate life, your faith becomes a testimony that strengthens those who are facing uncertainty. And perhaps one of the most profound lessons learned in the later seasons of life is the understanding that time is precious. Each day becomes more meaningful because you recognize that it cannot be replaced. Instead of rushing through life, you begin to slow down and appreciate the present moment. You savor conversations with loved ones. You take time to reflect on the goodness of God. You notice the small details of life that once passed by unnoticed. Slowing down also creates space for prayer and reflection. Slowing down also creates space for prayer and reflection. Prayer becomes less about asking for things and more about expressing gratitude and seeking wisdom. The psalmist once described God as a refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. That presence becomes more noticeable when life becomes quieter. In silence, you begin to sense the comfort of God's guidance. In silence, you begin to sense the comfort of God's guidance. In stillness, you recognize the peace that comes from trusting Him completely. And the more you learn to trust, the less you feel the need to control every outcome. Control is something many people struggle with throughout their lives. They try to manage every detail and predict every possibility. But with age comes the realization that not everything can be controlled. Some situations must simply be entrusted to God. This act of surrender does not weaken the spirit. Instead, it strengthens faith. Faith grows when you release the burden of trying to manage everything on your own. Proverbs reminds us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and not rely solely on our own understanding. This verse becomes deeply meaningful as life progresses. You begin to see that many of the paths you once worried about eventually led to grow. With an understanding, trust allows the heart to rest. Rest creates peace, and peace brings a quiet joy that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. Joy in old age does not always appear as excitement or loud celebration. Often it appears as a gentle contentment that settles in the soul. It is the joy of knowing that you have lived with integrity. It is the joy of recognizing the faithfulness of God across many years. It is the joy of understanding that every experience, both joyful and painful, contributed to the wisdom you now carry. And as this quiet joy continues to grow inside the heart, the desire to argue, compete, or prove oneself begins to fade even more. What once seemed urgent now feels unnecessary. The conversations that once demanded your voice now pass by without disturbing your peace. You begin to realize that the greatest strength you possess in this season of life is not the power to speak louder than others, but the wisdom to remain calm, focused, and anchored in the quiet confidence that God has been guiding your journey from the very beginning. And as that quiet confidence continues to grow within the heart, life begins to move with a different rhythm. The urgency that once pushed you to respond to everything begins to disappear. The need to participate in every discussion, every argument, every opinion slowly fades away. In its place rises a peaceful awareness that your value does not increase because you spoke more, and it does not decrease because you chose silence. This awareness is one of the greatest freedoms a person can experience in the later seasons of life. Freedom from constant explanation, freedom from unnecessary conflict, freedom from the pressure to be understood by everyone. When you reach this place, you begin to understand something that the wise have always known. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is space. It is space for reflection, space for discernment, space for discernment, space for God to shape the thoughts of your heart. The scriptures often point to the power of stillness in the quietness of the wilderness. Prophets heard the voice of God. In the stillness of prayer, wisdom was revealed. Silence creates the environment where spiritual clarity can grow. Many people never discover this because their lives remain filled with constant noise. Conversations never stop. Opinions are exchanged endlessly. Attention is pulled in every direction. In that environment, the soul becomes tired. But when a person learns to step away from that noise, something refreshing begins to happen within them. Their mind becomes calmer. Their thoughts become clearer. Their spirit becomes stronger. Isaiah once said that in quietness and trust shall be your strength. These words reveal a powerful principle. Strength does not always appear through action. Sometimes it appears through restraint. Restraint is the discipline of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. It is the wisdom to recognize that not every battle needs to be fought. It is the wisdom to recognize that not every battle needs to be fought. As people grow older, they begin to see how much energy was once spent on things that had little lasting value. They remember arguments that changed nothing. They recall disagreements that produced no peace. They recognize that many conflicts were fueled by pride rather than truth. These realizations are not meant to bring regret, but to bring understanding. Understanding gives birth to wisdom. Wisdom transforms the way a person approaches life. Instead of reacting immediately, the wise person pauses. Instead of speaking quickly, they reflect. Instead of defending themselves aggressively, they allow their character to speak over time. Character is one of the most powerful forms of communication. A person may speak many words, but their actions will always reveal the truth about who they are. In the later seasons of life, people begin to understand that reputation is not built through loud declarations. That reputation is not built through loud declarations. It is built through consistent integrity. The psalmist once wrote that the righteous person walks with integrity and speaks truth in their heart. The righteous person walks with integrity and speaks truth in their heart. Integrity creates a quiet strength that does not depend on approval from others. When you live with integrity, you are no longer controlled by the opinions of those around you. You are guided by the principles that God has placed within your heart. This is why focusing on yourself in old age becomes so important. It is not about withdrawing from others. It is about nurturing the inner life that gives meaning to everything else. The inner life includes your thoughts, your faith, your values, and your relationship with God. These things require attention and care. These things require attention and care. Just as a garden must be cultivated to produce healthy fruit, the heart must be nurtured to produce wisdom and peace. Psalm 1 describes a person who delights in the ways of God as being like a tree planted by streams of water, yielding fruit in season. That image speaks of stability and nourishment. A tree planted near water does not struggle constantly for survival. Its roots receive what they need from the source that sustains them. In the same way, a person who focuses on their spiritual life develops roots that draw strength from their relationship with God. Those roots create resilience. They allow a person to remain calm even when circumstances change. And life will always include change. Friends may move away. Responsibilities may shift. Physical strength may gradually decline. But when your roots are anchored in faith, these changes do not steal your peace. Instead, they remind you that life is a journey guided by a faithful Creator. Psalm 71 carries a beautiful prayer from someone who has walked through many years of life. The writer says that God has been their hope since youth and asks not to be abandoned in old age. This prayer reveals something deeply human. As people grow older, they often reflect on the faithfulness of God across their lifetime. They remember the moments when help arrived unexpectedly. They remember the doors that opened at the right time. They remember the strength that appeared during difficult seasons. These memories become a testimony of divine guidance. They remind the heart that the same God who provided in the past will continue to provide in the present. When this understanding becomes deeply rooted, the fear of the future begins to disappear. Fear often grows when people believe they must face life alone. But faith reminds us that we are never alone. The psalmist once wrote that even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil because God is with us. That promise brings comfort in every season of life. It reminds us that our journey is not defined by uncertainty, but by the presence of a faithful guide. Because of this assurance, the wise person learns to release the burden of worry. Then they stop trying to control every detail of the future. Instead, they focus on living each day with gratitude and purpose. Purpose in old age often looks different than it did in youth. In younger years, purpose may involve building, achieving, and striving. In later years, purpose often appears through mentoring, encouraging, and guiding. Your experiences become lessons for those who are still navigating their own journeys. Your wisdom becomes a light for those who are searching for direction. Your calm presence becomes a source of reassurance for those who feel overwhelmed. The book of Titus speaks about older individuals teaching and encouraging the younger generation through their example. This role carries profound significance. It reminds us that influence does not disappear with age. Instead, it evolves. Influence becomes quieter but deeper. It moves from loud declarations to meaningful conversations. It moves from public recognition to personal impact. And often, the most powerful lessons are not spoken loudly at all. They are demonstrated through the way you live your life. When people see your patience during difficult moments, they learn the value of self-control. When they see your gratitude in simple circumstances, they learn the power of contentment. They learn the power of contentment. When they observe your faith during uncertain times, they gain courage for their own challenges. These quiet lessons often shape lives more profoundly than speeches or arguments. Another important aspect of focusing on yourself in old age is learning to release what no longer belongs in your life. Throughout the years, people collect many things that eventually become unnecessary. They collect worries that cannot be solved. They collect grudges that only bring pain. They collect expectations that were never meant to be fulfilled. Maturity brings the wisdom to let these things go. Letting go does not mean forgetting the past. It means refusing to allow the past to control the present. The Apostle Paul once wrote about forgetting what lies behind and pressing forward to what lies ahead. This principle applies to every stage of life. Even in old age, there is freedom in releasing the burdens of yesterday. When you release those burdens, your heart becomes lighter. You discover that peace grows when the soul is no longer carrying unnecessary weight. Peace allows you to enjoy the present moment more fully. It allows you to appreciate conversations with loved ones. It allows you to experience the quiet beauty of everyday life. And perhaps most importantly, it allows you to remain calm when the world around you becomes chaotic. The world will always include noise, conflict, and confusion. But the wise person learns that their inner peace does not need to be controlled by external circumstances. Jesus once spoke about peace that the world cannot give. While the world often defines peace as the absence of trouble, spiritual peace comes from the presence of faith. Faith reminds us that God is working even when we cannot see the outcome. Faith reminds us that every season of life carries meaning. Faith reminds us that the journey itself is part of the purpose. So, as this understanding deepens within the heart, silence becomes even more meaningful. Silence allows you to listen not only to others, but also to the gentle guidance that God places within your spirit. It allows you to notice the subtle ways wisdom appears in everyday experiences. It allows you to remain steady, or allows us to become distracted by temporary concerns. And the more you practice this discipline of quiet focus, the more you realize that the most valuable things in life were never meant to be loud or dramatic. They were meant to be steady, faithful, and quietly powerful. Forget, Haffelgay, shaping the soul day by day as you continue walking through the later seasons of life with patience, gratitude, and an unshakable trust in the God who has guided you through every chapter of your journey so far and who continues to walk beside you even now as your spirit grows calmer, your understanding grows deeper, and your heart learns to rest more completely in the peace that comes from living a life focused on what truly matters. Focused on what truly matters. And as the years continue to unfold and the journey of life stretches behind you like a long road traveled, the heart begins to recognize that wisdom is not something that arrives suddenly. It grows quietly, often unnoticed, through the experiences that shape a person's character. The victories you celebrate and the struggles you endure both become teachers. Character, the victories you endure, both become teachers. Over time, those lessons form a deeper understanding of life, and that understanding changes the way you respond to the world around you. In earlier years, people often move quickly through life. Decisions are made rapidly, conversations are intense, and emotions sometimes guide reactions before wisdom has time to speak. But age introduces a slower rhythm. It invites the soul to pause before responding. It teaches the heart that patience often reveals more truth than haste. Often reveals more truth than haste. The book of Proverbs tells us that the patient person has great understanding, but the quick-tempered person displays folly. This simple truth becomes clearer as time passes. When you have lived long enough to see how situations unfold, you begin to understand that rushing into every discussion rarely produces peace. Patience allows time to do what arguments cannot accomplish. Time exposes truth. Time reveals motives. Time softens emotions that once felt overwhelming. Because of this, the wise person in old age begins to step back from unnecessary disputes. They recognize that their peace is more valuable than their pride. They no longer feel the need to correct every misunderstanding or answer every criticism. Instead, they choose a different path. They choose the path of quiet dignity. Dignity is the calm of strength that appears when a person knows who they are and what they stand for. It does not depend on the approval of others. It rests on the foundation of integrity. Integrity means living in alignment with the values God has placed in your heart. Integrity means living in alignment with the values God has placed in your heart. It means speaking truth, even when it is unpopular, and remaining silent when words would create harm. Psalm 15 describes a person who walks with integrity as someone who speaks truth from the heart and keeps their promises even when it costs them something. Such a life leaves a powerful legacy. Legacy is another reality that becomes more meaningful as people grow older. In younger years, many individuals focus on building success and achieving recognition. They want to leave their mark on the world through accomplishments, but later in life, the definition of legacy often changes. Legacy becomes less about achievements and more about influence. It becomes about the way your life has shaped the lives of others. Think about the people who influenced you when you were younger. Often it was not the loudest voices that left the deepest impact. It was the quiet examples of patience, kindness, and faithfulness. Perhaps it was a parent who showed resilience during difficult times. Perhaps it was a parent who showed resilience during difficult times. Perhaps it was a parent who showed resilience during difficult times. Perhaps it was a mentor who offered wisdom at the right moment. Perhaps it was an older friend who listened with compassion when you needed guidance, which soaked up the compassion when you needed guidance. These individuals may not have spoken constantly, but when they did speak, their words carried weight. Their presence alone provided reassurance. Their presence alone provided reassurance. That is the kind of influence that grows naturally when a person learns the discipline of silence and self-focus in old age. Silence allows you to observe more deeply. Silence allows you to observe more deeply. Observation reveals patterns in life that cannot be seen through constant activity. For example, you begin to notice how people react when they feel threatened or insecure. You begin to see how pride often creates unnecessary conflict. You begin to understand that many arguments are not about truth at all, but about the desire to feel important. Recognizing these patterns allows the wise person to remain calm while others become emotional. They understand that reacting with anger rarely produces understanding. They understand that reacting with anger rarely produces understanding. The book of Proverbs also reminds us that a gentle answer turns away wrath. Gentleness becomes one of the greatest strengths of maturity. It is not weakness. It is controlled. Strength guided by wisdom. A gentle spirit has the ability to calm tense situations. It brings peace where chaos might otherwise grow. When people encounter someone who carries that kind of calmness, they feel safe. Safety is a powerful gift to offer others. In a world filled with noise and tension, a peaceful presence becomes a source of comfort. But maintaining that peaceful presence requires intentional focus. It requires guarding the heart against bitterness and resentment. Bitterness can quietly enter the soul when disappointments are allowed to grow unchecked. Over the years, people experience many disappointments. Plans may not unfold as expected. Relationships may change. Opportunities may be lost. If these experiences are carried as unresolved pain, they can harden the heart. But the path of wisdom leads in a different direction. Wisdom invites forgiveness. Wisdom invites forgiveness. Forgiveness releases the soul from the chains of past injuries. It allows the heart to remain open rather than closed. Ephesians encourages believers to put away bitterness, anger, and harsh words, choosing instead kindness and compassion. This teaching becomes especially meaningful in the later seasons of life. Carrying anger into old age only steals the peace that should accompany those years, but releasing anger creates space for joy. Joy in later life is often quieter than the excitement of youth. It appears as contentment. It appears as gratitude for the simple blessings that surround you. You begin to find happiness in ordinary moments. A quiet morning becomes meaningful. A conversation with a loved one becomes precious. A walk outside becomes a reminder of the beauty of creation. Psalm 90 reminds us that life passes quickly and that wisdom comes from understanding the value of each day. When you realize how precious time truly is, you begin to treat each moment with greater care. Stop filling your days with unnecessary stress. You begin to choose activities and conversations that bring peace rather than tension. This is one of the reasons focusing on yourself becomes so important in old age. It is not about withdrawing from relationships. It is about protecting the condition of your soul. Your soul is the center of your thoughts, emotions, and spiritual awareness. When it is healthy, everything else in life becomes easier to manage. Psalm 23 describes how God restores the soul. Restoration often happens in quiet places. It happens when you spend time in prayer. It happens when you reflect on Scripture. It happens when you allow your mind to rest rather than constantly racing from one concern to another. Prayer in old age often becomes deeper and more reflective. Instead of asking for many things, you begin to express gratitude and seek wisdom. You thank God for the years you have been given. You thank Him for the lessons that shaped your character. You ask for the ability to use your remaining years with purpose and grace. And in those quiet conversations with God, you often feel a sense of peace that cannot be explained by circumstances alone. That peace is the result of trust. Trust grows when you have seen God's faithfulness through many seasons. Each answered prayer, each unexpected provision, each moment of guidance becomes a reminder that you are not walking through life alone. The prophet Isaiah wrote that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. This promise applies to every stage of life. Strength in later years may not appear as physical endurance, but it appears as spiritual resilience. It appears as the ability to remain hopeful even when challenges arise. Hope is a powerful force. It keeps the heart alive with expectation. It reminds us that every day still holds opportunities for kindness. It reminds us that every day still holds opportunities for kindness, growth, and meaningful connection. Even in old age, a person can continue to learn. Learning keeps the mind active and the spirit curious. It prevents life from becoming stagnant. Ecclesiastes speaks about the value of wisdom and how it preserves the life of the one who possesses it. Wisdom is not simply knowledge collected from books. It is understanding gained through experience and reflection. When you share that wisdom with others, you extend the value of your own journey. When you share that wisdom with others, you extend the value of your own journey. The lessons you learn through years of effort and perseverance become guidance for those who are still beginning their paths. But sharing wisdom does not require constant speeches. Often it appears through simple conversations, a thoughtful word offered at the right moment, a story that illustrates a life lesson, a quiet reminder that patience often produces better outcomes than haste. These small moments of guidance can shape someone's perspective for years to come. And the beautiful thing about this season of life is that you no longer need to rush. You can speak when it matters and remain silent when it does not. Silence becomes your ally rather than your enemy. It protects your energy. It preserves your dignity. It preserves your dignity. It allows you to observe the unfolding of life with clarity. The psalmist once wrote that those who seek peace and pursue it will experience the goodness of God. Pursuing peace requires intentional choices. It means choosing calm conversations instead of heated debates. It means choosing gratitude instead of complaint. It means choosing reflection instead of constant distraction. When these choices become habits, your life begins to radiate stability. Others notice it. They sense that you carry a calm center that is not easily shaken. And as that calm center continues to strengthen, the later chapters of life begin to reveal a quiet beauty that many people overlook. A quiet beauty that many people overlook. K, the beauty of slower mornings, thoughtful conversations, grateful prayers, and peaceful evenings becomes more meaningful than the busy ambitions that once filled your days. And in those peaceful evenings, when the noise of the day has faded and the world grows quiet, the heart often begins to reflect more deeply on the journey that has been traveled. Reflection becomes one of the most powerful companions in the later seasons of life. 40, it allows a person to revisit moments not with regret, but with understanding. You begin to see how every chapter of your life carried a lesson that was shaping you. Some lessons arrive through joy and success. Others arrive through pain and disappointment. Yet both kinds of experiences were working together to build the wisdom that now lives inside your spirit. Romans reminds us that all things work together for good, for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. When a person looks back over many years of living, this truth becomes clearer. Situations that once felt confusing often reveal their meaning with time. Perhaps there were moments when doors closed and you did not understand why. At the time, it felt like loss. It felt like something important had been taken away. But years later, you can see that those closed doors protected you from paths that would not have led to peace. Perhaps there were seasons when life slowed down unexpectedly. Responsibilities changed. Opportunities shifted. At the time, it felt like uncertainty. But now you recognize that those slower seasons allowed your heart to grow stronger and your faith to deepen. Reflection reveals the quiet ways God has been guiding your journey all along. This realization brings humility. Humility grows when a person recognizes that their life has been shaped by both their efforts and God's grace. It reminds you that success was never achieved by strength. It reminds you that success was never achieved by strength. NGF alone, it was supported by opportunities, relationships, and guidance that appeared at the right time. The book of James tells us that every good and perfect gift comes from above. This understanding changes the way a person views their accomplishments. This understanding changes the way a person views their accomplishments. Instead of pride, it creates gratitude. Gratitude softens the spirit and makes a person more compassionate toward others. When you realize how much grace has been present in your own life, it becomes easier to extend patience to those who are still learning. Patience becomes one of the most beautiful qualities of maturity. It allows you to watch others grow without rushing them. It allows you to listen to their struggles without judging them. It allows you to listen to their struggles without judging them. Many younger people feel pressure to solve everything immediately. They want answers quickly. They want solutions that appear overnight. But those who have lived longer understand that growth often takes time. Seeds planted in the soil do not produce fruit instantly. They require seasons of care, sunlight, and nourishment. In the same way, character develops slowly through experience. Because of this, the wise person in old age becomes more patient with the journey of others. They know that everyone is walking through their own season of learning. Instead of criticizing mistakes, they offer encouragement. Instead of pointing out failures, they share stories that reveal the lessons hidden within their own past struggles. These stories carry wisdom because they come from lived experience. Ecclesiastes reminds us that wisdom is a shelter, just as money is a shelter. But wisdom has the advantage of preserving the life of its owner. Wisdom protects the heart from unnecessary suffering because it helps a person avoid repeating harmful patterns. One of the patterns many people learn to avoid as they grow older is the habit of reacting to everything emotional. Reactions often create situations that could have been prevented with a moment of calm reflection. That is why silence becomes such a powerful discipline in old age. Silence gives the mind time to process what is happening before responding. Silence creates distance between an event and your reaction to it. Silence allows wisdom to guide your words instead of impulse. Proverbs tells us that the one who guards their mouth preserves their life. This verse highlights the importance of thoughtful communication. Words can build relationships or damage them. Words can encourage hope or create discouragement. When a person learns to speak carefully, their words become tools of healing rather than sources of conflict. Their words become tools of healing rather than sources of conflict. As people grow older, they often become more selective with their words. They choose conversations that bring meaning rather than noise. They choose conversations that bring meaning rather than noise. They spend time discussing ideas that inspire growth rather than arguments that produce frustration. This shift in conversation reflects a deeper shift in priorities. In youth, many people pursue recognition and competition. In maturity, they pursue peace and understanding. Peace is not simply the absence of problems. It is the presence of stability within the heart. The psalmist once wrote that great peace belongs to those who love God's ways and nothing can make them stumble. This kind of peace creates resilience. It allows a person to remain steady, even when circumstances change. Circumstances will always change. Health may fluctuate. Relationships may evolve. The world around us continues to move in unpredictable ways. But inner peace provides a foundation that remains stable despite those changes. Inner peace grows when a person focuses on what they can control and releases what they cannot. You can control your attitude. You can control your response to challenges. You can control the way you treat others. But many things in life remain outside your control. Learning to release those things is one of the greatest acts of wisdom. Proverbs encourages us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and not lean solely on our own understanding. Trust allows the heart to rest. Rest becomes increasingly valuable as people grow older. After many years of responsibilities and effort, the soul begins to appreciate moments of stillness. Stillness is not laziness. It is restoration. When the mind becomes quiet, clarity begins to appear. When the heart becomes calm, gratitude begins to grow. When the spirit becomes still, faith becomes stronger. Faith becomes stronger. Faith is the anchor that holds the soul steady through every stage of life. It reminds us that our journey is part of a greater story that God is writing. Hebrews describes faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This assurance becomes especially meaningful in the later years of life. There may be questions about the future that remain unanswered. There may be uncertainties about what lies ahead. But faith provides the courage to trust that God's presence will continue to guide every step. Trusting God also removes the pressure to control everything. Many people spend years trying to shape circumstances according to their own plans. But life often unfolds in ways that cannot be predicted. When a person learns to trust God fully, they discover a different kind of freedom. They no longer feel anxious about every possibility. They no longer feel anxious about every possibility. They no longer worry about every outcome. Instead, they focus on living each day with gratitude, kindness. Purpose in old age often becomes quieter, but more meaningful. It appears in the way you care for others. It appears in the wisdom you share with younger generations. Psalm 71 speaks about declaring God's power to the next generation. Reese reminds us that the later seasons of life carry a responsibility to pass on the lessons learned through experience. You may not realize how valuable your perspective is to someone who is just beginning their journey. A young person facing uncertainty may gain confidence from hearing how you overcame similar challenges. A friend experiencing disappointment may find hope in the way you describe God's faithfulness during difficult seasons. Your story becomes a bridge that connects generations. And the beautiful thing about sharing wisdom in old age is that it does not require dramatic speeches. Often it happens through simple conversations, quiet encouragement, and thoughtful guidance offered at the right moment. The world today is filled with noise. The world today is filled with noise. Opinions are shared constantly, and everyone seems eager to speak. But in the middle of all that noise, the calm voice of experience carries unique value. People listen more carefully when someone speaks with humility and sincerity. They recognize the difference between words spoken for attention and words spoken from genuine wisdom. That is why the discipline of silence remains so powerful. It ensures that when you do speak, your words carry purpose. Your voice becomes a source of clarity rather than confusion. And as the years continue to pass, the heart begins to appreciate the simple beauty of living quietly with purpose. The desire to compete fades away. The need to impress others disappears. In its place grows a gentle confidence that your life has meaning beyond recognition. You begin to measure success not by applause, but by peace. You measure success by the strength of your faith. You measure success by the kindness you have shown to others. You measure success by the strength of your faith. You measure success by the kindness you have shown to others. You measure success by the wisdom that has grown through years of learning. And in those quiet moments of reflection, when you look back over the long path behind you and see the countless ways God has guided your steps, a deep sense of gratitude begins to fill your heart, reminding you that every season of life, every lesson learned, and every moment of silence has been shaping your spirit for this very stage where peace, wisdom, and quiet trust become the most valuable treasures you carry. As you continue walking forward with a calm heart, a patient mind, and a faith that has grown strong enough to rest in the certainty that the same God who has led you through every chapter of your life will remain faithful through every chapter that is still to come, as your journey continues to unfold in quiet strength and thoughtful reflection. He's shaping you. Thoughtful reflection. And so as life continues to move forward and the years gently unfold, the greatest lesson that begins to shine through every experience is this simple but powerful truth. Peace is more valuable than noise, and wisdom is stronger than endless words. The latest seasons of life are not meant to be filled with unnecessary battles or the exhausting need to prove yourself to the world.